How's it going, Ann Kemp? This is Justin Giboney. I'm the president of the Ann Campaign, and this is another civic update where we are trying to raise civic literacy among Christians so that as we go out into the public square, we can do so in an informed and effective manner. We need to be as effective as possible when we are advocating for human flourishing, advocating for human dignity. That's what Christians should be using politics, not being used by politics, but using politics to do. And the Ann Campaign wants to help everybody with that. I want to talk about two issues today. The first is what's going on in Venezuela, which we should all be praying about and all be aware of. And the second is comments made by the Virginia governor about an abortion bill that the Democrats were trying to push through. Something else that we all need to be aware of and we all need to be praying about. Starting with Venezuela, you may have heard that there is a very serious humanitarian crisis going on in Venezuela. Millions of Venezuelans have already left the country because of a lack of food, a lack of medicine, lack of medical supplies, and also power outages. So you can imagine the suffering that these people are going through. We all need to be in prayer about what's going on in Venezuela. It is said that in 2017, the average Venezuelan lost 24 pounds simply because there was no food. You go to the store, there's no food in the store to buy. Even if you had money to buy it, there's no food there. At one point, the Venezuelan government told them to try to catch rabbits and eat the rabbits. That was all they could really tell them to do. So it's a very tough situation down there. The United States government has warned American citizens not to go to Venezuela because of all the crime that's going on, but also there's some arbitrary detention of United States citizens because the United States has taken the opposite position with the person who's in power now, and I'll get into that as well. But this is somewhat odd. You wouldn't think that this would happen because this is a country that is oil rich. They have one of the largest oil reserves in the world. But somehow the country is suffering from somehow they got to the point where they were suffering from serious inflation and the economy just tanked. Now, why that happened is subject to debate. Some people would say it was socialism and that socialism was to blame for it. Others would blame imperialism and issues that they were having with banks that may not have been fair to them. I'll let you guys look that up and make the decision on that. But those are kind of the two sides that if you ask that question, those are the two answers that you would get. Now, you can imagine when you have these kind of economic issues and people are starving, there's going to be kind of a power struggle. There's going to be political strife, and that's exactly what's going on in Venezuela right now. The late Hugo Chavez, who was the president for a long time, handpicked a guy named Nicolas Maduro, who is still in power today. However, the opposition to him, which is no small opposition because the opposition is the National Assembly legislature, they are saying that he's an illegitimate president because there was a lot of fraud and a whole bunch of other stuff that went on during this last election. So they said he's not really the president. He's there, but he didn't get elected in a legitimate way. Some people say that he started to lose support when he made some bad economic decisions. Others would also point to the fact that he actually removed some people off of the Supreme Court and replaced them with people that would support him. And so they're saying because of that, he's illegitimate. Now, the United States, Israel, Canada, and several other Latin countries have gotten behind the head of the national legislature, which is a 35-year-old named Juan Guaido. And Guaido recently announced at a big event that he should be the interim, that he was actually the interim president pursuant to the constitution, pursuant to the Venezuelan constitution. He was saying that he should actually be the president because the other guy, Maduro, was not elected through fair elections. And so they're going back and forth on that. He also asked that the military join him because he had the Constitution behind him. It doesn't look like the military is listening to this. Maduro, in response to what this guy was saying, basically said, hey, this is just a puppet of imperialism trying to take over our country, and you've seen what they basically already have done to us. So that was the response. These are the two sides going back and forth. The United States has chosen a side. You got to keep in mind that America is the number one customer, I believe, when it comes to Venezuelan oil as well. So there's a lot of, this is a very dynamic situation that folks need to be paying attention to. Our national security advisor, John Bolton, actually said that or didn't say, but is actually considering sending, I think, about 5,000 American troops to Colombia, basically for possible intervention in Venezuela. So this could become a military, this has military implications. It could become something that could really affect us up here and could prolong a lot of the suffering that's going down in Venezuela. So be praying for those people. It's a tough situation, a lot of suffering, and we just pray that there is a solution that is found and that it's not about power. It's actually about helping the people who are down there suffering. The next issue I want to talk about, as you guys know, last week we talked about the abortion bill that passed in New York that people were celebrating, which allowed abortion basically up until birth. And some people said, well, you know, what were the circumstances that would allow it up until birth? Well, the circumstances were if the mother's health was in jeopardy and also her life. Usually it was just the life. But when you say health, that kind of opens it up, because health in general is going to be a potential problem anytime you're in a pregnancy. And so that makes a very low standard based on who's interpreting it. So the Virginia governor was basically defending a bill that the Democrats brought up in Virginia that would allow third-term abortions, basically late-term abortions. I don't know if you guys saw the video. There was a lady who was trying to defend it. I think she was a state representative. And when they asked her what was the limit on abortions, when would you say no, someone couldn't have an abortion based on this bill? And she basically said there was no limit. And so the governor has been asked a lot of questions about this, whether he supported it or not. Basically, he said he supported it. And I want to read this because I want to get it right. This was his statement in regard to this abortion bill. If a mother is in labor, the infant would be delivered, right? The infant would be kept comfortable, which means the infant is conscious and the infant is alive. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physician and the mother. So you have a baby that's waiting for people to decide whether it should continue to live or not. That's basically what's described in this conversation. And he kept saying, I just want the state to get out of it. This should be up to the mother and her physicians, which to me becomes a cop-out. We love our physicians. We know our physicians have expertise when it comes to these things. They've studied for years. But at the same time, a physician is not a philosopher king, right? A physician does not get to decide when a baby is alive, whether the baby should stay alive or not. There's no education that you get that allows you to do that gives you some type of supreme knowledge to make that particular decision. So when you keep hearing, well, this is between the mother and the physician, when the baby's already alive, that's not a decision that a physician should make with the mother. That decision has already been made. The baby is alive, right? And so that conversation, I think, gets kind of old. And somebody needs to step up. I mean, this has become such an issue that I think the candidates in 2020, the candidates for the president and the Senate are going to have to say something about this. Where do you stand on this particular issue? Because it's such a serious issue. And this is why I don't get super excited when a candidate gives us a Bible passage or talks about their faith in a speech. How does your faith apply to the issues? That's great to hear, but when it comes to an issue like this, how does your faith apply, right? I love hearing how it applies to issues of poverty and all that stuff, but how does it apply to social issues too? And if it has no application, then you need to say it has no application. And then we know how seriously to take your recitation of Scripture, right? This is a serious issue, and Christians, and I would say especially Christians of color, we got to step up and say something. As somebody who's been a Democrat, I really think that we as Democrats have to say something about this before it goes too far. You really can't go any further than this. This is as far as you can push this abortion conversation, and it's time to step up and do something about it. So good talking to y'all today. These are two issues we should all be praying about. There's a lot of suffering and really just a lot of almost madness going on when it comes to this abortion conversation. People just trying to push it to the limit and get as much as they can instead of getting good policy. This is not good policy. The governor of Virginia, it was unfortunate that he made that commentary. It sounded like he was just reading what somebody had given him. People need to be more thoughtful about this conversation. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you. I'll see you next time.